cry in the night. The night was cold and quiet. The wind moved slowly through the dry fields. Old Thomas sat alone in his small wooden house. His fire was low, and he was just about to sleep when he heard a sound. Soft, strange, and not like anything he had heard before. It wasn't a dog and it wasn't a machine. It sounded like a child crying, but the cry was not fully human. Thomas stood up quickly. He grabbed his coat and lantern and stepped out into the dark. The sound came from his old barn. He hadn't used it much since his animals died years ago. His boots crushed the dry grass as he walked toward the noise. His heart beat faster with every step. When he opened the barn door, the cry stopped. The lantern's light showed something unexpected. In the far corner of the barn near the old straw was a shape. A figure. No, 2 figures. One was tall and thin, sitting on the ground, and the other was very small and shaking in her arms. Thomas didn't speak. He held the lantern higher. It was a woman, but not human. Her skin was soft blue, almost shining in the lantern light. Her eyes were wide and glowing faintly. Her long silver hair was dirty and hanging in front of her face. She looked tired, as if she hadn't slept in days. In her arms, a tiny child with the same soft blue skin cried softly, weak from hunger or cold. Thomas took 1 step closer. The woman pulled the child tighter and gave a sharp sound, almost like a warning. She didn't know him. She didn't trust him. Thomas raised his hands slowly to show he meant no harm. He looked into her eyes. They were full of fear, but also something else. Pain. She was hurt, but not just in the body, something deeper. He spoke gently, even though he knew she might not understand. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "I won't hurt you." She didn't answer. Her lips were dry. Her arms were shaking. The child had stopped crying now, but looked too weak to move. Thomas knelt down slowly and placed the lantern on the ground. He took off his coat and laid it near them. She didn't move at first. Then, very slowly, she reached forward and took the coat with one hand, wrapping it around the child. For a few minutes, no one spoke. There was only silence between them, heavy but not dangerous. Thomas didn't ask questions. He could see she was running from something. She looked like someone who had lost everything. He stood up and said quietly, "Wait here." He went back to his house, moving faster than before. He warmed up some soup, grabbed a soft old blanket, and returned to the barn. When he came back, she hadn't moved, but when she smelled the soup, her eyes followed the bowl. Thomas placed it down near her and stepped back. Slowly, very slowly, she reached out and began to feed her child first. That small act, feeding the child before herself, touched Thomas deeply. He had lost his own family long ago. His wife had died, and their only son had gone missing during the early alien wars. Seeing this mother care for her child brought back memories he had locked away for years. She ate carefully, watching him the whole time. He didn't try to talk again. He just sat nearby on an old wooden box, watching the stars through a hole in the barn roof. He didn't know what she was, where she came from, or why she was here, but something in his heart told him. She was not dangerous. She was just desperate. Later, when the child fell asleep, the woman finally looked at Thomas with less fear. She touched her chest and said softly, "Lyra." It was her name. Thomas pointed to himself and replied, "Thomas." She nodded slowly. For the first time, her face relaxed just a little. A moment passed between them. It was the start of something neither of them could explain, but in the shadows beyond the trees, something else was moving, something that had followed her across worlds. Thomas didn't know it yet, but by letting this alien mother and child stay, he had placed himself in danger. A silent war was chasing her, and it was getting closer. But for now, inside that quiet barn, the child slept peacefully for the first time in days, and Thomas watched over them, as if they were his own. Oh, Warm blanket and cold truths. Morning came slowly. The sky was still dark gray when Thomas walked back to the barn with warm bread and water. Inside, the alien woman named Lyra was sitting quietly, holding her child close. She looked tired, but her eyes were open now, more aware than before. Thomas placed the bread on a small wooden box and pushed it toward her. She didn't move at first. Then, after a long moment, she picked it up and gently broke off a small piece. She gave it to her child first, who chewed weakly but eagerly. Only then did she take a bite herself. Thomas noticed how careful she was, always putting her child first, always watching him with caution. He sat on the other side of the barn and began speaking, not expecting her to understand everything. "I don't know why you're here," he said slowly, "but something tells me you're running from something bad." Lyra looked up. She pointed to herself, then to the child, and made a pushing motion with her hand, like being forced away. Then she pointed up to the sky. Thomas understood a little. She came from the stars, and she had been pushed out. He nodded. "Banished," he said softly. She looked at him and blinked slowly. That word seemed to mean something. The child sneezed, and Lyra pulled the blanket tighter around him. The child looked different from her. His eyes were brighter, his features softer. Thomas noticed it but didn't say anything. He could guess something few others might understand. Later, Lyra tried to speak. Her words were broken, hard to follow, but she was trying. "Clan said no. Child, not pure. I, not obey. They angry. They take my life." Thomas leaned forward, listening carefully. "You were supposed to give up your child?" he asked. She nodded. Her voice cracked. "They said, he is wrong. Not full royal. I run." Now it was clearer. Lyra was from a powerful, alien group, maybe even a royal one. But her child was born from someone outside their rules, a mate they didn't accept. Because of that, they had turned against her. They wanted her gone. Maybe they wanted her dead. Thomas felt a heavy weight in his chest. He had heard stories like this before, not from aliens, but from humans. A long time ago, even people on Earth had punished others for breaking rules, about love and family. But to punish a mother for loving her child, that was cruel in any world. "You did the right thing," he said. Lyra didn't speak, but her eyes softened. Thomas stood and looked around the barn. It was still cold and not safe for a long stay. If others were searching for her, they might come here soon. He needed to do something. He thought about the old cellar under the barn, a hidden place where he once stored tools and food. It had been closed for years, but it could work. "I'll fix a better place for you," he told her. "You can't stay in the open." She didn't understand every word, but she saw his hands and heard his tone. She gave a slow nod. That day, Thomas cleared the cellar. He removed old boxes and tools, cleaned the floor, and brought down a soft mat and blankets. Lyra helped where she could. She moved quietly, with grace and strength, even though she was still weak. Her child followed her closely, always holding her hand. In the quiet moments between work, Lyra told Thomas more, simple pieces of her story. Her people lived in floating cities above clouds, far from war and danger. But their rules were hard. She had been a healer, someone respected. Then she fell in love with a man from a worker caste. That love was forbidden. When her child was born, her clan ordered her to surrender him. She refused. So they took her home, stripped her title, and marked her as impure. She escaped, barely alive, flying a stolen pod until she reached Earth. "Why Earth?" Thomas asked. Lyra looked at him and gave the smallest smile. "You protect. You different." He didn't know what to say to that. Maybe they had heard stories about humans being kind or dangerous. Maybe both. Either way, she had risked everything to come here. And now, it was his choice what to do next. That night, Thomas brought a warm bowl of stew and sat beside her for a while. The child slept, breathing slowly, holding a small stuffed animal Thomas had found in a box of his old things. Lyra didn't eat much. Her thoughts were heavy. "They come," she said quietly. "They find." Thomas nodded slowly. "Then we'll be ready." For the first time, she didn't look afraid. She looked calm. Outside, the stars were clear. But somewhere in that peaceful sky, danger waited. Thomas knew the silence wouldn't last. But inside the barn, in that old hidden cellar, something gentle had begun to grow. Trust. And that was stronger than fear. Footsteps in the mud. Rain started before dawn. Soft at first, then steady, soaking the ground and leaving the earth dark and heavy. Thomas stood by the window sipping weak coffee, listening to the drops hit the roof. Everything felt quiet, but not safe. He walked out toward the barn, boots sinking into the wet dirt. He had lived alone for years, and nothing on his land ever felt out of place. But this morning something felt wrong. As he reached the barn, he stopped. Just outside the door in the muddy ground were prints. Large ones, not animal, not human either. They were deep and shaped like thick claws. 3 toes in the front, 1 in the back, and they were fresh. Thomas looked around. The rain had started, only a short while ago, which meant whoever had made those tracks was here not long before. He pushed open the barn door slowly. Inside, Lyra was already awake. Her child sat close to her, holding a small piece of bread. Lyra's eyes met Thomas's. At once, she could see it in his face. Something was wrong. Thomas pointed to the ground outside. Then he held up 3 fingers, showing her the tracks. Lyra's face tightened with fear. She whispered only one word. "Trackers." Thomas didn't ask what they were. He didn't need to. Her voice was enough. He stepped back outside and checked the area. The tracks circled near the barn but didn't go in. Whoever it was had come close and left. Or maybe they were still nearby, watching. Back inside, Thomas spoke calmly. "We need to move. You now. The cellar isn't enough anymore." Lyra didn't argue. She held her child close and nodded. That afternoon, Thomas began clearing out an old storage room deeper under the barn. Long ago, it had been used to keep tools and parts for farming machines. Now it would become a shelter. Lyra helped quietly, lifting things carefully. Her strength was returning, but her eyes kept moving, watching the door, listening for strange sounds. The child helped in small ways too. He didn't speak much, but he stayed near his mother and followed Thomas with curious eyes. He was a gentle boy with bright markings on his skin that glowed softly at night. Thomas had never seen a child like him. Strange, yes, but not frightening. He was just a boy. When evening came, Thomas sat near the barn door, shotgun beside him, thinking hard. He knew now that Lyra's enemies had found Earth, or at least found her trail. That meant more might come. And next time they might not leave tracks and walk away. They might come inside. They might not care who they hurt. Thomas had once been a soldier long ago. He had fought during the first alien conflicts, but he had never imagined an alien woman and her son would one day need his help. And yet here they were. Later that night, Lyra finally spoke again. Her words were broken, but her message was clear. "They smell us. The child. His blood is marked. They follow the scent." "Not far." Thomas looked at her with disbelief. "You mean they can smell him from space?" She nodded. "The blood, royal but not full. They hate that. Want to erase it." Thomas rubbed his forehead. "So they'll keep coming." "Yes," she said softly. "Until he's gone." Silence fell between them. Thomas looked at the child who was now sleeping, his small head resting on an old pillow. The boy had done nothing wrong, just born into the wrong story, born into a world that feared what he might become. "Then we don't let them find him," Thomas said. "We make sure they never touch him." Lyra looked at him unsure. "Why, help?" Thomas didn't answer right away. He stood, looked at the barn roof where stars could be seen between wooden beams. Because I lost someone once. My son. To a war. To fear. Nobody helped me. Nobody cared. Maybe it's time someone cared. Lyra didn't speak again, but her eyes said what words could not. That night, Thomas didn't sleep. He stayed awake, listening to every sound. Shotgun across his lap. Rain fell harder. Wind pushed through the trees. And in the distance, something else moved. A low mechanical hum. Faint, but real. He whispered to himself, "They're coming back." The ground was wet. The prints would be washed away by morning. But the danger was growing, and Thomas knew. This wasn't just about hiding anymore. It was about survival, and he would fight not because they asked him to, but because they needed him. Because someone had to stand between a child and the monsters chasing him. The hidden room the next morning, the sky was clear, but the air was heavy. Something unseen pressed down on the land. Thomas felt it in his bones. Trouble was getting closer. He had worked through most of the night, turning the storage room under the barn into something stronger. He sealed the entrance with thick boards, added old metal sheets for extra cover, and even placed some sensors from his army days. He hadn't used those devices in years, but now they were ready again. Inside the hidden room, it was cool and dark. Lyra sat in the corner, wrapping her child in a soft blanket. The child was quiet, playing with a small wooden toy Thomas had carved for him. His glowing marks had faded a little, but Lyra still looked worried. Thomas could see it. She hadn't slept. He handed her a cup of warm tea and sat near her. "This place will keep you safe for now," he said. "It's not much, but it's better than the barn." Lyra gave a small nod. Her eyes scanned the walls, the ceiling, the floor. She didn't feel safe yet. Not truly. Thomas couldn't blame her. She was a mother on the run. Peace didn't come easy. After a while, Lyra began to speak more clearly. Her words were slow, but her voice was stronger than before. "I was a healer," she said. "My hands. They helped many. But when I chose love, they called me broken." Thomas listened carefully. "I loved a worker," she continued. "Not royal, not strong, but kind. He gave me this child. When the leaders found out, they gave me a choice. Give up the child, or lose everything." She looked down at the boy in her arms. "I chose him." Thomas nodded slowly. "And that makes you stronger than all of them." Lyra smiled a little, but it faded fast. "They are coming, not just trackers. Soon more. They will not stop. They will search every planet, every world." Thomas stood and paced across the room. "Then we need a way to leave." She looked up, surprised. "Leave?" "There's an old escape pod buried under this land. Crashed long ago during the first alien war. I kept it hidden, never thought I'd use it, but maybe now." Lyra's eyes lit up with new hope. "You fly it?" Thomas shook his head. "I don't know how, but maybe you do." She stood slowly and walked to him. "Show me." They went outside. Thomas led her through the back of the barn, down a path overgrown with weeds and thyme. Beneath a heavy metal door hidden under wood and dirt was the broken pod. Dusty, dented but not destroyed. Lyra touched it gently like an old friend. Her fingers moved over the surface with skill, searching for life. After a few moments, she looked up. "I can fix," she said. "But need parts." Thomas sighed. "Parts like what?" She looked at his house. "Your machines. Old, but good. Maybe we find what we need." Back in the barn, Thomas began gathering tools, wires, batteries, anything that might help. Lyra worked silently, focused. Her child stayed inside the hidden room, sleeping soundly for the first time in days. Time passed quickly. They worked all day, side by side. Thomas watched her. The way her hands moved, the way her eyes scanned every piece. She wasn't just a healer. She was an engineer too. She was more than what her people had seen. As evening came, Lyra paused and looked at Thomas. You help with no reward. Why? He looked at her, eyes serious. Because you remind me what it means to be human. Suddenly a sharp sound came from outside, a loud buzz, the sensors. Thomas rushed to the front of the barn. A shadow passed over the land, smooth, black, and flying low. A small alien scout ship hovered above the field, scanning. It made no noise, just a light moving slowly over the ground. Thomas froze. Lyra stepped beside him, holding her child, now awake and scared. The boy's marks began to glow again, reacting to the ship. Thomas grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her back inside. They rushed down into the hidden room. He closed the entrance and covered it with boxes. Inside the darkness, they held their breath. The scout ship hovered outside for several minutes. Then it flew off. Silence returned, but the fear remained. They know we're here, Thomas said. It's only a matter of time now. Lyra held her child close. We fix ship. We go soon. Thomas nodded. Tomorrow we finish it. That night, the stars were clear again, but they no longer brought peace. Somewhere beyond them, more ships were coming. But under the barn, in the quiet dark, hope was being built, piece by piece, wire by wire. And for the first time, Lyra believed they might escape. When the past finds you, the morning sun rose quietly. But the silence didn't feel calm. It felt heavy, like the sky itself was watching. Thomas stepped outside with a wrench in his hand and a storm in his chest. Something didn't feel right. The wind had changed. The air was still. Too still. Inside the barn, Lyra was already working on the old pod. Her hands moved fast now. She had cleaned the inside, replaced broken wires, and used parts from Thomas's machines to restore the control panel. The child sat near her, playing with metal scraps, his skin glowing with soft blue light. He was calm, unaware of how close danger truly was. Thomas brought her a small tool and asked, "How close are we?" Lyra wiped sweat from her brow. "Soon. Maybe one more day." Before Thomas could answer, a sharp sound echoed across the field, a loud, unnatural hum. Then, voices. Not human. Thomas rushed to the door and looked out. 3 figures were walking toward the barn from the tree line. Tall, armored, and smooth-skinned. Alien trackers. They weren't hiding anymore. Their steps were slow, confident, like they already knew what they'd find. He turned back quickly. "They're here." Lyra froze. The child stood and grabbed her hand. Thomas pulled open a hidden panel in the barn floor. "Go to the room. Now." Lyra climbed down fast, carrying the boy. Thomas threw a thick cloth over the pod and covered it with tools and hay. Then he stepped outside to face the visitors. They stopped a few feet from him. One stepped forward and spoke in perfect English, though the voice was cold and lifeless. "We seek the traitor, a female. And the half-blood she carries." Thomas kept his face calm. "I don't know who you're talking about." The alien's eyes narrowed. "Our scans say otherwise. Her scent is here." Thomas crossed his arms. "All kinds of people pass through here. Maybe your machines are broken." The alien stepped closer, scanning him from head to toe. "You are human, weak, but strangely loyal. That is dangerous." Thomas didn't flinch. "If you're done insulting me, I have work to do." The alien stared at him a moment longer. Then, without warning, it turned and walked toward the barn. Thomas's heart jumped. He stepped in its way. "You're not welcome in there." Another alien raised a strange weapon, but the leader held up a hand. "We will not fight you today, but we will return. And when we do, your life and this place will be ash." They turned and walked away, vanishing back into the trees. Thomas stood there, breathing hard. His fists were tight. His mind was racing. He didn't know how much longer they could hide. Back in the hidden room, Lyra held her child tightly. She had heard every word. "They will kill you," she whispered when Thomas came down. "Let them try," he replied. "We leave tomorrow night." Lyra looked tired but nodded. That evening, Thomas brought a map of nearby valleys and cliffs. "There's an old launch path," he said, pointing to a hill. "Used it years ago during a war. If the pod flies, we can get you out." "We," Lyra said softly. Thomas paused. "No. You and the boy. I stay." She looked at him shocked. "Why?" Thomas smiled sadly. "Because I'm just an old man with no home beyond this place. But you have a future." Lyra grabbed his hand. "You gave us safety. You gave him hope. You are part of our future now." Thomas didn't answer. He looked away, hiding the emotion in his eyes. Suddenly, the child walked up to him and held out a small silver piece, one from the pod. A gift. Thomas took it slowly. The boy smiled. For a moment, the fear faded. That night, Thomas sat on the porch, shotgun in his lap. He watched the stars move above, knowing that each light could be another enemy ship. He had faced war before, but this was different. This time he wasn't fighting for a flag. He was fighting for a child who had never harmed anyone, for a mother who chose love over power. He closed his eyes for a moment. The past had found them. But tomorrow they would try to leave it behind, and Thomas would do whatever it took to buy them that chance, even if it meant facing the enemy alone. The escape plan night fell fast, like a blanket dropped from the sky. The stars were hidden behind dark clouds. The wind was strong. The air smelled like rain, but also like fear. Inside the barn, the old escape pod was almost ready. Lights on the control panel now blinked green. The engine, though damaged, was working. Lyra had spent all day fixing broken wires, patching holes, and testing systems. She was tired, her hands covered in small burns and scratches, but her eyes were focused. She had to finish. There was no more time. Thomas stood beside her with a silent worry in his chest. He had filled the pod with supplies, food, water, tools, and maps. The hidden hill where they would launch was 5 miles away. Not far, but far enough when you were being hunted. Suddenly the boy coughed. Lyra turned to him quickly. His skin looked pale under the glow of the pod lights. He was shaking. She placed her hand on his forehead and frowned. "He's getting worse?" she whispered. Thomas stepped closer. "Sick?" She nodded. "He is not made for this cold. His body is too mixed, too fragile." Thomas looked at the pod. "Will he survive the flight?" "I don't know," she said softly. "But if we stay here, they will find us." Thomas rubbed his face, thinking fast. "We go at dawn. No more waiting." Lyra nodded, but the fear in her eyes grew deeper. Outside, the wind howled louder. An hour later, while packing more supplies into the pod, Thomas heard a low hum in the distance. Not natural. It was the sound of machines, big ones. He rushed outside, climbed the fence, and looked toward the woods. His heart stopped. Several small lights moved through the trees. Fast, controlled, alien. He ran back. "They're here," he said. "We have minutes, not hours." Lyra grabbed her child and held him close. Thomas climbed into the pod and powered it up. The soft rumble shook the barn floor. The pod's engine was loud now, too loud. It would call the enemy straight to them. "We need to move it out now," he said. "Push it. I'll drive the truck. You follow in the pod." "No," Lyra said quickly. "They will follow engine noise. They'll find you." Thomas looked at her. "I'm counting on it." He led the pod onto the old farm truck's trailer and tied it down fast. Lyra and her child climbed inside, silent and ready. Thomas turned the key. The truck roared to life. As they pulled away from the barn, Thomas saw movement in the trees. Shadows. Gleaming eyes. The trackers were here. "They're coming." "Lyra," cried from the pod. Thomas pressed harder on the gas. The truck bounced over the rough land. Behind them, the barn exploded in a burst of fire. One of the machines had destroyed it, searching for them, but too late. They reached the hill, the old launch slope, as rain began to fall. Thomas parked the truck, jumped out, and began releasing the pod. Lyra opened the hatch and held her child. Close. He was barely awake, burning with fever. "You have to go," Thomas shouted. She reached for him, shaking her head. "Not without you." Thomas smiled through the fear. "They won't stop chasing this place unless they think I'm still. Here, I'll lead them away." She grabbed his hand. "You are not just a helper. You are family now." For a second, Thomas said nothing. Then he leaned down and gently touched the boy's head. "Take care of him," he said softly. "Make sure he grows up free." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. The child opened his eyes slightly and looked at Thomas. For a brief moment, the boy's hand reached out. Thomas stepped back. "Go." Lyra climbed inside the pod and closed the hatch. The engine roared again and the pod lifted slowly into the air. At that exact moment, 3 alien machines burst through the trees, weapons raised. They fired at the sky, but too late. The pod vanished into the clouds, a trail of fire and light. Behind it, the machines turned toward Thomas. He stood alone, shotgun in hand, eyes calm. "You lost," he said. And then he ran, not away, but toward the forest, leading the machines deeper into the land, away from where the pod had gone, away from where hope still flew. Back in the sky inside the pod, Lyra watched Earth shrink below them. Her child slept in her arms, breathing slow and weak, but alive. She wiped her tears and whispered, "He saved us." And far below, Thomas disappeared into the woods, the sound of machines following behind him. He had given everything, but he had also given them a future. A sky full of hope. The stars above were bright, but Lyra's heart was heavy. The pod flew high over Earth, moving through the quiet black sky. Her child lay still in her arms, warm now, but weak. His breathing was soft. His glowing marks were dim. Lyra touched his face gently, her fingers trembling. She had escaped, but at what cost? She looked down through the pod's viewing glass. The green and blue planet grew smaller behind her. Somewhere down there, Thomas was running, alone, chased by machines built to kill. He had no ship, no escape, yet he had stayed behind to protect them. Tears ran down her cheeks. She had lost everything once before, her home, her people, her name. And now she feared she had lost him too. She turned her eyes forward. The stars looked endless, but she knew where to go. There was a small moon colony far from her world, a place where forgotten people lived in peace, a place where her son could grow without fear. Thomas had marked the coordinates for her. He had planned it all. She whispered to herself, "Hold on just a little longer." Hours passed. The pod glided through silent space. Then, finally, the colony came into view, a silver arc resting gently on a rocky moon, lit by soft orange lights. It was quiet, hidden, safe. Lyra landed the pod on a small platform. Helpers from the colony ran forward. They didn't ask questions. They saw her child, sick and barely awake, and carried him inside. A healer arrived quickly, scanning him with gentle hands and glowing tools. "He will live," the healer said after some time. "He is strong, even with his mixed blood." Lyra fell to her knees in relief. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Thomas." Days passed. The child slowly healed. His color returned, his smile came back, and his laughter, soft and light, filled the small room where they now lived. Lyra began to help around the colony, fixing machines, teaching healing skills, and telling her story to those who would listen. But at night, when everything was quiet, she sat by the window and looked up at the stars, always wondering, was Thomas still alive? She never stopped thinking about him. The man who gave her a second chance, the man who protected her child like his own. She owed him more than words could ever repay. Then one evening, as she walked past the colony's main gate, she heard a voice calling. A young scout pointed to the sky. "There's a ship, small, old, coming this way." Lyra turned and looked up. A tiny, beat-up Earthship floated down slowly. Its engines sputtered, its wings bent, but it flew. It landed hard, kicking up dust and dirt. Lyra's heart stopped. The door opened, and Thomas stepped out. His face was covered in dirt, one arm held close to his side. His clothes were torn, but his eyes, tired but alive, found her. She ran to him without thinking. He didn't speak. She didn't need him to. She just held him tightly, shaking. "I thought you were gone," she whispered. "I almost was," he replied with a tired smile. "But your pod left a signal trail. I followed." Behind them, the child ran forward and hugged Thomas's leg, smiling wide. For the first time, Thomas laughed. "Hey, kid, miss me?" Lyra pulled back and looked into his eyes. "You're staying now. No more running." Thomas nodded. "I've got nowhere else to be." And so the three of them stayed. On that quiet moon, far from pain and war, they built a new life. A small home, a garden, friends who didn't care about bloodlines or rules. Lyra became a leader in the colony, using her skills to help others. Thomas taught children how to build, how to fix, and how to survive. And the boy, the child once called impure, grew up happy, strong, and proud. He was not royalty, and he was not normal, but he was loved. And in the stars above, where once only danger waited, there was now peace. Because one human believed in kindness, because one mother chose love over fear, and because one child dared to exist and lived. The sky was still full of stars, but now, for Lyra and Thomas, it was also full of hope.